Welcome to another episode of Too Late with Dave. I'm here with Perou, and we're going to moan a little bit, talk about his ongoing fabulous career, quite varied. And we're in a, for those of you who've tuned in before, we're in a slightly different environment. It's a little bit more informal. And let's see if that has any effect on proceedings. How are you, sir?
I'm good, actually, yeah. I'm good, thank you. It's very good to be here.
What have you lost in the last few days?
A camera,
yeah.
Which has been upsetting me greatly. Even though, like, as a photographer, I don't really care for my cameras. Losing one felt like I was losing a child, weirdly. But it was more that I'd lost something and I couldn't work out where it was, and I was feeling that I was going through some sort of early onset dementia because it disobeyed the laws of physics. It had to be somewhere. It wasn't in my house, it wasn't in my car, and it wasn't at my mum and dad's house, and it wasn't anywhere in between, although it must be somewhere.
So if anyone finds a...
I hope it does really good for them. I hope they have some good experiences with them, and it's a useful tool.
Maybe we could do some viral shit where we get it back.
Yeah, if anybody finds a missing Canon 5GX or G5X Mark II in a nice leather case with a nice peak design wrist strap somewhere near Ashford in Kent, it's mine.
How do you feel about...
Podcasts?
No, we'll get to that. I saw someone posting the other day, having a little rant, which I quite enjoyed, about photographers who post pictures of their cameras more than they post pictures of their work or their food.
I don't think I've ever photographed my camera. Like I say, a lot of amateur photographers really care about their cameras and their lenses and the equipment that they have. And I've always sort of resented my camera. I mainly shoot on a Hasselblad, digital Hasselblad. For a very small amount of time, I was an ambassador for Hasselblad, but I think I was dropped because I kept calling it a Hasselbad, because up until the HD, well, I have an HD6 or an H6D, I can never work out which one it is. But I've got the latest one, and that's the one that works, but everything before that didn't work, and now they've discontinued them. So
you're no longer biting the hand that feeds you, it's just not feeding you?
That's correct, yeah. I'm an ambassador for nobody.
Do you think Hasselblad will send you a camera to replace your lost one?
No.
Maybe Canon will?
No, Canon have no interest in me whatsoever. No. I've tried that route.
It's interesting with camera sponsors. I spoke to someone at Leica, because we were using their studio, about how you go about, not for me, but for someone else, how you go about being sponsored or whatever. And they said, we don't bother because the people with money are going to buy it. Real photographers don't.
Yeah, I don't think Hasselblad sell many cameras around the world these days.
Have you seen that shop they've got in Piccadilly?
I've heard about it.
It's like a weird place to have a Hasselblad shop, right on Piccadilly Circus.
Yeah, that is weird.
Hasselblad and drones.
I can understand drones, maybe.
Yeah, but in the same shop.
Yeah, and in the centre of London where you can't fly them.
No, true.
I sort of should explain that I exist in a bubble, and I'm not really able to talk to you about anything that exists outside of my bubble.
Okay. Well, we'll see how far we get. I think if we look at... these pictures are in no particular order, as always, and these, for those of you who've listened before, there's, other than knowing the person I'm talking to for some time, there's no other preparation except for choosing some pictures, which don't necessarily connect to each other or anything. But
no, much like my career, it's all very tangents, going off on tangents. But even before you switch into that picture, I should say that the name of your podcast, which is that about? Is it about photography? It's too late.
Well, originally the idea came with Shona and Will. We have a little, I don't know what you'd call it, like a self-help group, because we were photographers, picture editors, producers, everything. We were combining our skills and helping each other out. And then...
What are you too late for?
Too late. Well, the idea was a gallery where we sold, because people always ask, can you get us a print of this? Can you get us? I'm looking for a picture of a cat, or I'm looking for a picture of Jimi Hendrix. And we didn't really want to be a traditional gallery, but we were sourcing pictures for people, and then we had collected various photos over the years, and so we had a lot of one-off pictures.
I see.
So it's like,
The
okay,
runs
let's
over.
stick it up. If you miss it, you're too late.
I see.
But then it's actually morphed into me mainly quite late, despite thinking I'm on time. But I have no concept of time, so...
It's something that people have said to me over the years as a photographer. It's specifically like Marilyn Manson always used to say to me, too late. Because when I was live on sort of live tour with him, and I'd have a Nikon FM2 manual focus film camera, you know, with 3500 ASA film, and it cranked with no flash. I'd always be like trying to focus and get the shot of him, and it would be gone. And he'd look at me and go, too late.
Yeah.
And it was like the reason that I sort of eventually, I guess, got a digital camera with autofocus on it for the first time, so that I could try and keep up with people. So,
What does he say to you now when you miss a shot?
I never miss a shot now.
Oh, smooth.
One other thing he said to me live on stage was when I was in Berlin with him years ago on tour, and I was standing behind him on stage as he was like one arm up in the air, and 10,000 Germans had their arms up in the air. And I got this sort of epic shot of him, the back of him with all this audience going off. He turned around, I was standing behind him, he went, "Get the fuck off my stage." And I was like, got to be here to take it, you know. Sorry.
Well, he'd probably complain if you didn't get the shot.
He probably would complain. Yeah.
Would you rather photograph a live gig or a live giant pussycat?
I rarely photograph live bands. I've sort of got a real thing about not photographing live bands. I only really photographed Manson live. I did a lot of live photography with Underworld years ago. But generally, I only want to be shooting live if I'm on stage or backstage. I don't want to be in the pit. I hate seeing pictures of people shot up their noses
Most
first.
unflattering place to have your picture taken from.
Yeah, and you know, they generally give everybody the first 3 songs and then you're out. So if I'm shooting a show, generally I'll wait till the pit photographers have left, and then I might go in and take a picture from the pit. But yeah, I don't really like live photography. It's not really interesting to me. You're sort of working with somebody else's lighting and trying to catch something. So no, I'd much rather photograph a tiger.
So tell us how this came about.
Nice segue in. This is Nias, aka Crazy Eyes. He's sadly no longer with us in the world, but at the time he was alive and kicking. And a friend of mine was working at this place called the Big Cat Sanctuary that rehomes and cares for ex-circus animals, cats, big cats. And I was invited to photograph some tigers, lions, cheetahs, and so forth. And I thought, how does everybody else do it? They usually shoot in daylight with long lenses because that's safe and sensible. And I decided to set up a photo studio inside a lion's den. So that's what happened. This is Nias, as I say, and he hated me. He hated me a lot. And I spent sort of six months going every week trying to get Nias used to being flashed and photographed.
What was the first reaction, like the first flash?
Well, he didn't like the flash, to be honest. And so there was a lot of training. So every time the flash went off, he'd get a bit of horse meat, which is like a treat for a big cat. And
try that with musicians.
Yeah, I've tried similar, but not with horse meat. So for the first 6 months, I started off with like a Hasselblad right up against. There was a mesh weld fence between us, like a 3mm mesh weld fence, and it started off with a camera sort of trying to shoot between the holes of the fence, tethered to a laptop, and every time the cat walked past, I'd press the button and it would try and take a picture. And I didn't get anything for the first 6 months, and then after a while, I abandoned that idea and actually had to stand at the fence holding the camera in my hand and sort of try and do it for reels.
But was that fence secure enough? Like, if he wanted to go for you, would he have got you?
Well, there were times when like the cats would like really be upset about the fact that I was there. I literally just had to walk into a room, and that cat, Nice, would like start going nuts because he just absolutely hated me. Can I swear on this show? I can't remember. Okay, I'll try not to because try and swear less. But
what happens? The iTunes. I think in this day and age, you can pretty much do and say anything.
Okay, I'll try to stop swearing, but he really hated me, and I'd just have to walk into a room, and I'd say to the keepers, "Is it something about me?" And they were saying, "No, it's probably something that the way you stand or your height or your voice reminds this cat of somebody that mistreated him in the past." And so it's nothing personal, but it is really personal.
Yeah.
And so it took a long time to sort of gain his trust to get to a point where I could take a picture at this fence. There wasn't any real danger to me in some respects, as this fence was going to hold. But there were times, when I photographed the cheetahs, and in the cheetahs, we were in the same room as them, and so I would kneel down to take a picture to be the same height as the cheetah, and I'd have a keeper either side of me, and they'd go, "Oh no, you can't kneel down because you make yourself a smaller target." So I would go. So then I'd have like two keepers either side of me, so that we were a bigger combined target. And they were saying, "Oh, there's never been a problem with the cheetahs. The cheetahs are absolutely fine. You never get into trouble with the cheetah." And the next day, Bryony, the head keeper, would call me and go, "I said there's never a problem with the cheetah." And I go, "Yeah." She said, "Yesterday, one of these cheetahs, Brian, I can't remember his name, but she said one of these cheetahs, I just sensed this thing, and I moved back just as he swiped past my head, and I was like, wow, did he have his claws retracted?" And she went, "No, they don't have retractable claws." It was so there was sort of an element of danger. There's definitely no way I would ever. You see reels sometimes on Instagram of people sort of with cats, big cats, and playing with them and sort of cuddling them. I'm so scared of big cats, lions. There's another one I photographed, like this white lion, and they have an outside enclosure, and at one point he was sort of over in the distance, and I had kind of my back to this big fence outside, and I just sort of could sense that this tiger was diagonally walking towards me, pretending that it wasn't. It was kind of looking over that way, but it was getting closer and closer to the back of me. And then when he felt he could, he threw himself at the fence, and the whole fence went whoop, 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 and it's like...
I'd shit myself.
Yeah. I'd say, what would happen, Bryony had, been with Naya since he was a cub, and he really liked her, and there's this sort of noise that you can make where you sort of chuck, make this noise that's calming to them, and they do it back to people they like, and we hand feed them. And I'd say to Bryony, what would happen? You're his favourite. What would happen if you got in his cage with him? And she was like, he would immediately tear my throat out and kill me. It's like, yeah, I'm not going to get in that.
Yeah. And then you did you had these displayed really large format at
in London Bridge.
Yeah, that was fantastic.
Yeah, it was good because it was around COVID as well, so it was supposed to be up for maybe a month, and it was up for like 8 months because it went through COVID, and it was in that I can't remember the name of the bridge, but it was in London Bridge down a tunnel outside the thing, so it got seen by a lot of people.
Yeah, it was great.
And they were like 2 meters by 2 meters.
So moving on from working with animals to working with children or former children, he was just Justin Bieber for Q magazine, and I think he just turned 21, and so the idea was that instead of being a teeny bopper, he was being portrayed as an adult, and so it was Cash for Questions, which readers used to write in questions which would be read out. So they were usually a little bit silly, less formal, less journalistic. I can't tell you what all the emails from readers were asking us to ask him, but it wasn't nice.
Oh, because I remember actually there was a bit in it where when I was photographing him, I said he was complaining about people always asking him the same questions. And I said, "Oh, you should interview yourself." And somebody said, "Oh, what would you ask yourself if you could ask yourself a question?" And he thought about it for a bit, and he goes, "Why are you so sexy?"
And he was serious.
He was serious.
Yeah. So the concept was that he would be busting out of a Bieber doll box, which we were told not to call a doll. It was an action figure.
Yeah, action Justin.
And so he was going to be sort of tearing out of this plastic sheeting, and then you photograph the box and put it all together. Quite very realistic. Too.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that early days of Photoshop. What year was this? Do you have any idea? It was just before he lost his mind and became interesting.
It's when he got his first tattoo.
Yeah, I often sort of say that he was the most bland and insipid person I'd ever met in my life. And that's after some other people that I can probably mention, or shouldn't mention. He came, before he even got to the studio, there was a security sweep of the studio. It was a music studio in West London, and Duran Duran had just vacated, and there was this really funny hum in the room.
Brum.
Is that what it was?
Yeah.
So it was weird. And then these two guys came in suits with earpieces, and they just sort of ignored us, but started lifting up cushions and like doing a security sweep of the room. And I was going, and then they went clear, and I went, there's me, Dave, and my assistant Maria in the room. What's the possible...
On a first floor room with barred windows.
Yeah. What's the possible problem here? You know, why are you doing a security sweep? And the guy just went, he's worth $60 million. And I went, okay, fair enough. Yeah, good point. But they ended up being ex-Mossad, his security service.
And not very tall.
No.
But they probably don't need to be.
No.
They didn't look like security.
Except they were in suits with earpieces,
and they
were walking around going, clear. Yeah, they did. But he did have a really big entourage as well for people on a photo shoot.
That's the biggest entourage I've seen on a shoot, on a music shoot.
Yeah, I mean, with So Solid crew, it's hard to know who's entourage and who's in the band. I photographed those guys, the Diplomats, as well in New York, and again, it's hard to know who's in the Diplomats, who's entourage. I remember shooting 50 Cent and Floyd Mayweather once together as the money team, and 50 came with one old guy. That was his entourage, just like this old dude that drove him, and Floyd Mayweather came in like 3 Chevy Tahoes full of entourage that just stood around and went, woo, yeah, and everything he did they laughed at. But getting back to it, Justin Bieber's entourage ended, I don't know if you remember, but it ended with this guy, and he was sort of in this tracksuit. He looked like a boxer coming in.
It was all red.
All red, hood up,
Adidas hat,
covered in prison tattoos. And he came in and he was looking so moody, and I was just introduced him as Jeremy. This is Jeremy, and he stood behind me, and he was like this really intimidating presence. So every time I took a picture of Justin, I would ask him to do something, and Justin would have to like look to the side to see if he was allowed to do that. So I'd say,
I remember you said look up, and he did that, and then...
Yeah, exactly. You know, he couldn't, everything was controlled. There was like this massive control about him. I remember but this guy was like always stood behind me, Jeremy, and it looked so moody. And at one point I wanted Justin to look tough. And I was like, you know, can you do like a mean face? And it was obviously really difficult for him because he's this skinny little kid. And I go, can you like show us your guns? And he had these little sparrow's kneecaps, and he went like that, and then went to kiss his sparrow's kneecaps, and I was a little bit sick in my mouth. But I was going, no, can you be mean like Jeremy here? And I'd said to Jeremy, because we were shooting on this red background, Jeremy was fully red. I said to Jeremy, as I always try and ingratiate myself with the scariest person in the room, as he came in, I said, oh, thank you for colour coordinating with the background. And he just looked at me like, I'm going to kill you. But anyway, I was going, can you be mean like Jeremy? Look, and I turned around and Jeremy was like snarling at me. I was going, do what Jeremy's doing. He's doing mean really good. And Justin was like, couldn't quite get it together. And at the end of the shoot, everybody left and the publicist was there, and I was going, who is Jeremy? And they went, that's Justin's dad. And I went, right, I'd rather be photographing Jeremy, to be honest, because he's got something going on.
He was quite animated, yeah.
Yeah.
But what I found interesting, literally when you said look left, he'd have to check and someone, and it just seemed I mean, he was very sweet and nice, but it just seemed like a sad existence where, you know, permission to shit.
I've had other shoots before where, you know, I photographed One Direction quite early on, and I had this idea that I was going to. At one point, they were changing between shots, and they all had their shirts off. They were just wearing trousers, and I went, "This is great. Let's do a shot where you're all just standing, black and white, be very moody. You're all just standing around with your shirts off." And they were young, you know, and their publicist just went, "No, they do not do that. Absolutely not." And they were up for it, but they weren't allowed to do something. You know, they weren't allowed to show sort of character and so on. And
I'm going to do a whole episode of publicists that stopped great shots being taken.
I've got so many stories. They were always the bane. You know, there are very few publicists that were brilliant and had a light touch and sort of were part of the creative process and helped things along. You know, specifically American publicists felt the need to always intervene right at the wrong moment and just to make a point of being there and justify their existence, you know. So, yeah.
We'll get you back on for that one.
Here's a long list.
So, fear of clowns.
I think it's important as a photographer to either photograph things you love or hate, especially in like your personal work. And I hate clowns. People.
Just for those who are listening, not looking, we have a picture of you as a clown in clown makeup.
Yes.
And this was a series you did.
Called coulrophobia.
That's the word I can
Me is the fear of clowns.
Yeah.
And that's me by 19 of the world's greatest makeup artists doing their interpretation of what a clown face would be, but always on me.
Yeah. Who did this particular?
This is Lonnie Bauer. This is one of my favourites from that session. And the 20th person was Marilyn Manson, who did me as a clown as well.
Now, did you know what they were going to do?
Had no idea.
So you just sat down in the chair and they...
do what you want. And so each of them, their brief was only just to do me as a clown, however they wanted to do. And generally I would go out afterwards, after the shoot, in full clown face, you know, go to Soho House, do some work on my laptop. People would sort of... It's amazing how, like, most of the time, nobody ever commented. Most people would, like, make like I was invisible, even though I was dressed in full clown face. But I would, like, occasionally... This wasn't, like, the most scary. This is a very beautiful version, but there were some that were pretty scary. You know, James O'Reilly did a really scary one, and that one particularly I was at Soho House wearing afterwards, and somebody would look at me and I'd smile at them and just carry on smiling at them until they went... and leave. But there was one where we were, I think Natalie Sharp did one. I was shot at my old studio in Bromley by Bow, and I was walking the dog along the canal afterwards, but in full clown face, and these like 3 hoodies came up like they were going to do me, and I just looked up and I had full clown face on, and they just split. It was fantastic.
Yeah, I might do
So I hate clowns, but I like being a clown myself.
And these were self-portraits?
Yeah, you know, always photographed by an assistant or somebody around.
But you set it all up.
But I like to call them self-portraits because it was my
Old
idea.
school, you know, the photographer directed.
Yeah, Cindy Sherman. You don't have to press the button yourself for it to be a self-portrait. And then this all sort of came about because I hate clowns, and so I started doing the first few pictures of myself as clowns, and we started having clown face parties at my studio where everybody would have to come, whatever clothes they were wearing, but they had to come in clown face. And then I kept getting makeup artists in to do my makeup for the parties, and it became a thing. You know, we had a series.
Have you overcome your fear of clowns?
I don't have a fear of clowns. I just hate clowns. I really hate them. Before I did all of this, I did, as a way of sort of dealing with how much I hate clowns, I went to Butlins, Bognor Regis Butlins, on a clown convention, and I photographed something like 30 clowns, and they were really, really annoying people, generally, and I had food poisoning. I'd given myself food poisoning, so I'd do a shot, and then I'd sort of run to the toilet, vomit everywhere, and I'd come back like sort of sweating to carry on, and they would be with sort of feather duster going, "Oh, are you having a funny day?" And I fucking hate you, cunt. There's probably swear words that I can't use on YouTube. That was one of them. Just beat me out if I'm inappropriately swearing.
Nothing's inappropriate. Then we have Courtney Love.
The worst times make for the best stories. So Courtney had invited the NME, weirdly, to listen to this rediscovered Nirvana song. I think it was called That's How It Is, from memory. And me and this journalist went out to LA to meet Courtney and do some pictures of her to go with this first listen to the secret Nirvana song that had been rediscovered, and had like the worst weekend in Los Angeles trying to track down Courtney, trying to get this photo done. And it just was torturous. It's a really long story. It's probably like a whole podcast on its own.
We're trying to find her.
Yeah, when I write about it in the book that I'm sort of supposedly writing with Paul Reardon, I do it called Waiting for Godot, and then cross out Godot and put Courtney, Waiting for Courtney, because it was just at every opportunity that we were there to do a picture, she was not available to do the picture. She was there, but she wasn't ready to do the picture. And at the end of like a long weekend, so like we arrived on a Friday or a Thursday, and she was doing a gig out of town, and we'd been to the gig, and she kept us waiting for like 5 hours after the show to like meet her, and you know, we were all exhausted with jet lag and everything. She wasn't ready to do the pictures. We arranged to meet the next day in her boyfriend stroke manager stroke accountant's house, and he played the song on his kid's Fisher-Price tape player, and you know, the journalist heard it and wasn't even there actually to do the pictures. And then we had arranged to photograph her at the Hollywood Bowl. She was supporting Jane's Addiction, and we'd arranged to meet her in the afternoon, do the photos at the Hollywood Bowl. But nobody gives us any passes. So we turn up at the Hollywood Bowl and go, "Oh, we're here to photograph Courtney Love," and they go, "You're not on the list. Have you got a pass?" And I was like, "Fucking no, of course
Should
I
have had your
haven't."
clown makeup on.
Well, fortunately, Manson's guitar tech was working as maybe Stereo MC's guitar tech, and they were supporting as well, or maybe Jane's Addiction or someone, but I knew someone behind stage, and I was like, "Hey, get me in," and they got us in. But then Courtney didn't turn up at the arranged time anyway, and we were shooting film, and it was getting darker and darker, and I was stripping out 100 ASA film, putting in 400 ASA film, stripping it out, putting in 1600 ASA film. In the end, Courtney turns up and it's dark, and she goes, "Okay, I'm ready to do the pictures." I go, "Well, fuck me, this is nighttime." And she goes, "No, it's not." And I go, yeah, this is nighttime. This is what's known as dark, so I can't shoot it in daylight because there isn't any left. She was going, "Well, what do you want to do?" I said, "Do your show, come off, and we'll shoot in your dressing room." And so we arranged to do that. And eventually, she does her show. She doesn't come off stage. And it's at the Hollywood Bowl. You've got a curfew. So if you can't overrun, especially as a support. So like, Jane's Addiction were waiting to come on. Courtney's still playing. They like turn all her amps off, and she gets her drummer to carry on playing. She's playing on an acoustic guitar. They're pulling the drummer off by his hair, trying to get him off. She encourages her fans to do a stage invasion. It's a total disaster. She ends up locking herself in a toilet and tries to carry on her gig in a toilet. Again, it doesn't appear until the end of Jane's Addiction. I'm like in the basement of the Hollywood Bowl, and I can hear Jane's Addiction playing. She eventually turns up at like 11 o'clock, curfew's at midnight. And she goes, "Okay, I'm ready. What do you want to do?" And I go, "Well," and we've got a background set up and a light and that. She goes, "I know everything about lighting." And she manages to squeeze between the background light, so it's like attached to her belly and the background. And she goes, "Okay, I'm ready." And I was like, "Okay, just come forwards a little bit." And I'm shooting on a Mamiya RB67 manual focus. Like, you have to really crank out the bellows to get focus. And she literally started running from the background to the camera and back as fast as she could. And I was like trying to like crank it, and then she was going left to right, and she was going, "I know everything. I love London. Get me a James Bond cocktail." It was complete disastrous. And I turned to the journalist, was going, James was going, "This is brilliant. You're getting loads yet?" And I go, "I don't know if she's in a single frame that I've shot." And at the end of that, she goes, okay, let's do another. Let's come and take a picture of me pissing on the toilet." And I was like, okay. And she literally dragged me out of the band's dressing room into her own dressing room where she had been having a haircut. And she took off her clothes. Fortunately, there's no pictures of that, but she took off all her clothes and dived into this bag and pulled out 2 pink bras and went, "Which one?" And I went, "The pink one." And then we started taking these pictures, and I had to shoot in the toilet because there was no lights around in this dressing room. It was really dark, and I didn't have time to set up lights, so I was like, okay, we'll shoot in the bathroom. She sat on there, she pulled her knickers down, we took this picture, won some awards. But it was like the worst, sort of most stressful experience that I've had. I've had worse, more stressful experiences on shoots, but this was one of them. At the end of this, I was like, I didn't know if I'd got anything because we were shooting film, I hadn't shot any Polaroid. I was like so stressed out. And then she goes, "Do you want to go to Winona Ryder's house? It's her birthday." And we were like, okay. And so it was like me and James, Winona Ryder, her sister, Courtney, and her boyfriend at Winona Ryder's house. And me and James were just sitting there going, this is so weird. And they were like dancing to U2's It's a Beautiful Day, Winona and her sister and Courtney and her boyfriend. And I was just like, what is my life? Like, this is so odd. And Winona Ryder was so beautiful. And I remember looking at her, and she must have realised that I was staring with my mouth open. And she like turned around and started staring at me, and I was sort of, and look away, you know. And then she'd go, I'd look back, and she was still staring at me. I'd be like, oh, fucking hell. And Courtney showing us around Winona's bedroom as well, and like, do you want to see Winona's bedroom? And I'd be like, okay. It was like such a weird experience.
And did you ever hear what she thought of the picture?
She, now this is going back a few years, but she, I feel like she called me weeks later to complain about the pictures. And she tried to stop it, or she tried to stop the article or stop the pictures or something. And there was some sort of issue. I, as I may have mentioned before, may have early onset dementia. I am forgetting everything, and I didn't take notes at the time, which is really frustrating.
But you can make
Terrible
it up.
for podcasts. Tom Waits always told me that you should make up all your answers to any questions you're ever asked.
Yeah, he told me the same thing.
Yeah. Did he?
No.
No. But I really like it that Tom always changes his story. You know, if people ask him like his history, it's always different.
Yeah, fantastic.
And it's like it's more interesting. The truth's like boring. Who wants to hear the same story over and over again? So just invent it.
But we had we shot Courtney for Q.
Was that with Rankin?
No, that was the famous taxi ride session.
That was, yeah.
But no, with Alex Lake, and I think she was 6 days late, and then insisted on an early morning shoot and turned up in the afternoon when everyone was booked for half day. Pictures were great. She was great once she got it. And I, by coincidence, bumped into her at an event and was introduced to her in LA a few months later. And I said, oh, we met, we did the shoot. And had no recollection. I thought, fair enough.
No, it's interesting because lots of people don't recognise me. You know, for me, it's kind of, it sort of depends on the person. There are people that I've photographed, little bands that I photographed when they were starting out and stuff. And I used to photograph so many, and they were all called, you know, John, Steve. And I'd sort of write their names down on my hand at the beginning of the shoot, and I'd try and guess the name to the face. At the end of it, you know, I would immediately forget because the next day there'd be a whole 5 other guys to remember. And so those little bands that were signed, did an album, then disappeared, I might meet them 10 years later. And that was quite a big event for them to be photographed by me. And they'll go, hey, Perou, how's it going? And I'll go, yeah, really good, yeah. And I can't even remember their faces, not just their names. But there are people that I photographed who have photographed loads by loads of photographers, and I'm just another. And I've generally got a giant camera over my face, so even though I sort of feel that I don't look the same as everybody else, you know, I've got big ears and a skinhead, and you know, I dress a bit natty, I guess. people really easily forget who I am, and I'll meet somebody, you know, even a day or two after I photograph them, they'll go, "Oh, great, we had such a good time yesterday, didn't we?" And they'll look at me like, "I don't know you." They'll be like, "It's me, Perou, the photographer," and
But
they're
you
like,
know, it's an interesting
"Oh."
thing, and it's a recurrent thing where a photographer turns up to shoot someone who's been photographed a million times and is doing, you know, pulling out all the stops, but it's just another picture, another session.
Yeah. Yeah,
5
exactly. And so that's something that, as a photographer, I've sort of been aware of over the years. That's you know, people are kind of bored being photographed, and they're bored of being told what to do in photographs.
Yeah.
And so I have always tried to make the experience of being photographed by me an enjoyable thing and a pleasant thing. And so I'll always try and cut a shoot short.
Yeah.
Because people will go, "Wow, you finished," and they're not used to being sort of, you know.
Everyone wants more time.
Everyone wants more time, and loads of photographers have got this, you know, idea that this is about them, and this is their opportunity to do some great photograph. When actually, funnily enough, it's a life lesson that Jay-Z taught me when I was photographing him. And it's funny also now that there are so many people on my list of people that I've photographed that I have to go, "Can I say Jay-Z taught me a life lesson now? Can I have that picture of Russell Brand in my portfolio now?"
Your next book could be called Cancelled.
I never photographed Diddy, which is good.
Yet.
I guess. Yeah, I get around to photographing everybody eventually.
Tell us about Daft Punk here. With what's the challenge of shooting people where you can't see their face?
Well, strangely, I was talking to somebody about this the other day, but I have a photograph of Daft Punk shot in front of the Eiffel Tower where they're revealing their identities and they're pulling their masks up. But I've kind of got a gentleman's agreement that I will never release that picture. It was shot for them. But it's really burning a hole in my archive that I just want to put that picture out, especially as the other day somebody put out a load of behind the scenes video of me doing this shoot.
Right.
And also like snaps and somebody was photographing it while I was photographing it, and they've put out the pictures of the shoot. And it's like, where did these come from? Who did these? And, you know, they did give me a credit, which is nice. But this is shot in a studio in Paris. The heads are shot separately to the bodies, although that is actually Daft Punk. You know, it didn't need to be, but that is actually Daft Punk in the picture.
That's quite interesting. They could just send anyone, any two dudes.
Yeah, there's
ladies.
a lot of sort of talk. There was a lot of talk about that of the early days about whether they actually needed to be on stage, even that they could just send people around to go.
Like Kiss.
Yeah. So this is quite early, and this is sort of. I started as a fetish photographer, which we might come on to later, but
I think we will.
because I met somebody from a magazine called Skin 2. When I was at college, she went on to become the editor, Michelle. And so the first jobs that I got given were like to photograph people in rubber. And then like immediately was in a book called something like Masters of Erotic Fetish Fantasy Photography. Even though I'd only done a few editorial pictures and that. But that sort of set me up at the beginning as a fetish photographer, because people like to pigeonhole you. And then I started photographing friends in bands. And so then I sort of moved to being known as a music photographer.
So before you got into the fetish photography, did you have like a genre of photography you wanted to?
No, not at all.
Go for?
No. I just like taking pictures. I still do. And so like my sort of the work that I do is extraordinarily varied. Probably that isn't a good thing as a photographer, because people like you to be sort of specialised in one sort of photography, and they like you pretty much to take the same photograph over and over again. Yeah. For me, that would be boring. So I photograph things I either love or hate. But, you know, a lot of my favourite work is almost my personal work. And I'm sort of lucky that I just get paid to take pictures that I'd be taking if I wasn't being paid anyway, you know. But yeah.
And so I think we do have a fetish. Oh,
Oh no, this is like one of my more recent pictures. This was for a show in Kent where I live, and it was like lots of different artists that live in Kent. And this, I only put in one picture. This was the one picture, but this was floor to ceiling height, so it was kind of like maybe 2 times life size. This very imposing guy in his pants, John. I sort of say to people this is a self-portrait, but it's called Party for One, a celebration of Love Island, Beachbody Ready, and the implacable aging process. Because it's got a long title. But yeah, people it had a very mixed reception in the gallery. Some people thought it was funny, some people thought it was absolutely horrendous and were like really offended by it, which is kind of weird to me when people are offended by photographs. You know, I'm not.
Well, you know, that's how someone looks.
Yeah, you know, and
we see,
it's a very real picture of a very real person,
yeah.
you know, unretouched and as that person is. And like for me, his scars and his body and everything about him tells a story as well as everything else. But yeah, I've sort of spent a lot of time in life beautifying beautiful people, and I'm kind of bored of that in some respects. You know, if somebody wants to pay me to make somebody pretty, then I'll do it. But I'm interested in reality, and you know, to me, reality, especially with the rise of AI, is going to become more and more important and more valuable. And so, yeah, that's my thing at the moment. Real stuff. Talking of real stuff.
Local boy.
Is he? South London. Is he? So I photographed Lewis a couple of times.
Lewis Hamilton.
Lewis Hamilton. The first time I photographed him, he wouldn't sit with his legs crossed because he said that's how girls sit. The second time I photographed him was this time, and this was for Formula One magazine. And I don't normally shoot for Formula One magazine, but he had refused to work with the Formula One magazine anymore. So I was brought in to photograph him because they couldn't use their own photographer. And the first thing he said to me was, "What do you think of my Instagram account?" And I said, "Oh, I actually don't follow you on Instagram." And he was so offended that I didn't follow him on Instagram. And then I was like, "Oh, what's on your Instagram account?" And he went, "Well, I bought a really nice camera so that my friends could follow me around and take pictures of me doing cool stuff." I was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm going to follow you. That sounds great." And then he was like, "You're not the photographer I said I wouldn't work with again, are you?" And I went, "No, I'm the photographer that's worked with you before that probably won't work with you again." But this was, you know, you were saying that Justin Bieber thing was for Cash for Questions. This was for a similar sort of thing, right, where people could write questions into him. And somebody had written in this question, and I was photographing some sort of documentary stuff while he was being asked these questions. They said, you know, "I'm a really big fan, and if I could buy you anything in life, you know, for your birthday, what would it be?" And he was like, "Oh, God, I've got everything I want in life, so you'd be wasting your money." And I was like, "Oh, how about free hugs? Free hug?" It was ugly. It was an awful shoot, and yeah, I don't have a nice thing to say about him.
Nice picture though.
Great racing driver.
I like to think that he's crossing his legs out of shot.
He was very concerned that his at one point he was wearing this racing suit, and at one point he had to lift a medal, you know, like a trophy cup up. He was very concerned that it was cut quite tight and people might see the size of his John Thomas, which maybe wasn't as large as he'd like it to have been. I don't know. He was also very concerned about being the right shade of black. Which
in the picture? In
the picture, yeah, because obviously we have digital cameras and we can sort of, it comes up straight away these days, and so you can go, well, you know, this is what you look like in real life.
But do you find with digital that everyone, like, because like the other night I had to take a picture of someone under horrendous light, a bit impromptu, but it was a ceiling light and everyone was bald, and it was just thing. And I was like, this is terrible, everyone's going to look super bleached out. And when I played with it a little bit, still real, but just got rid of that, everyone's skin tone completely changed.
Well, obviously, yeah, you can change everyone's skin tone.
But when you look at the back of a camera, if your camera does that, it doesn't necessarily represent how it is going to be when it's...
Oh yeah, well I wouldn't show anybody that I've been working with what it looks like on the back of my camera, because the back of your camera might be set too bright anyway.
Yeah.
And you know, like you say, it doesn't really help. Like I've had things before. I photographed this kid. Can't remember his name, but he was in a boy band, and you know I did the pictures, and I shoot RAW, and on a Hasselblad, a RAW file is extremely flat, and you know pasty. The colours are all off, and it's not sharp even, and the client was looking at it going, oh, these pictures are terrible, you know, the colours like awful, the contrast is like awful, and I went, this is a RAW file. And, you know, it's difficult when you work for people that don't understand the sort of process. You know, they wouldn't look at a negative and go, well, it's a negative. And it's like, yeah.
But do you find out, like, because on some shoots, you know, where there's clients or PRs or management or someone looking, if the camera's tethered and they're looking at the laptop going, you know...
I won't shoot tethered anymore, because whenever I've shot tethered, there's been an art director standing on the tethered cable, which has made it stop working, and then you have to reset the whole computer. So like people say to me now, you know, oh, why don't you shoot tethered? And I went, because people like you stand on my tethered cable. So I always shoot to card. But I do find it really frustrating when people, you know, and like I've had a shoot last year where the person that I was photographing's makeup artist was standing there who offered a negative opinion about the picture. And again, it was like, it was just totally inappropriate for them to say something like that. And it swings how people receive the shot, you know, which is why there are photographers that specifically have yes people around and woo-ha people. You know, I know some photographers, you know, their assistants literally are there to go, that looks great, woohoo, yeah, woo-ha. And then everyone goes, yeah, these pictures are great. But if somebody's there going, I'm not sure about this one, then it sort of sets it all up wrong, you know.
We had a shoot, I won't name the band, but there was a lot of them, and there was a lot of toing and froing about each band member had to be represented equally on the cover. So I said to the PI, there's 7 of them. If you can draw it with the logo and the cover lines and the other pictures, we'll do it. But they're going to be that big each. So anyway, eventually we get this arrangement of everyone sitting, some standing, different. Anyway, all worked, all fitted. And an assistant was sitting over there, sideways, on the floor, and said to the singer, I can see a bit too much leg. I'm like, but you're underneath looking up. The camera's here looking down. But you're right, it just changed the mood, because then they started worrying about something that wasn't even visible.
I mean, for me as a photographer, and the reason that I haven't gone into film so much, you know, there was a whole sort of thing where digital photography came out, and anybody with a digital camera could start taking photographs, and all photographers went, oh, I'm now a photographer and director. And, you know,
cinematographer.
But I sort of went into that route a little bit, and I was signed to a directing production company and did a couple of videos. But for me, photography is a really autonomous thing, and it's about the way I see the world, and I can do it all on my own. I might have a team of people that are helping me do it. You know, I've got assistants that are helping set things up. I've got stylists, makeup, hair, but it's quite autonomous. It's about the way I see things. And in the old days, it used to be very much that people were paying me for the way that I saw the world and what was in front of me and what I was able to do with it, me. You know, photography is very sort of self-centered, self-obsessed. And that was encouraged in the old days. So that whole idea of like, everyone pitch in and like talk about what I'm doing while it's in a halfway stage, while I'm still working it out, is really frustrating. I know there are photographers that have sort of closed sets, and you know it's just them and the person that they're photographing, and that's a lovely way to be. But quite often I don't get that opportunity. I've got people pitching in.
Harder and harder these days. So we worked on this magnificent, very extravagant. This is a limited edition version of your Marilyn Manson book, 21 Years in Hell.
Best book in the world.
Best book in the world. A shockingly fast sellout as well. This edition sold out in less than an hour.
Yeah, that was exciting.
It's which was quite. But this, the cover had UV ink because I think Manson had UV makeup on. Was that right in the shot?
On the cover shot, he was wearing ultraviolet ink.
You needed an ultraviolet light to see it. There was a limited edition print, and then a Polaroid in a slate or stone sort of casket box.
Engraved with magic.
Yeah, and it was quite ornate production. So this literally was the culmination of 21 years of working with Manson quite intensely and closely. And
yeah, so I've now been working with Marilyn Manson for I'm just doing the maths. 27 years? I started in '98. Is that 27 years?
I'm no good with numbers.
It's 27 years.
Wow.
It's 27 years now. This was the culmination of 21 years of photos with Marilyn Manson, who is the person that I've photographed most in my career. And it was just to draw a line at that point under all of this archive that we had that was like quite special.
Well, also, like when we first started looking at it, this was published by Real Art Press, and it wouldn't ordinarily have been a subject matter, but what appealed was, A, the pictures were great, there was a lot of them, there was a lot of variety, and it was a complete story. Kind of like 21 years, it's a good number, and there was obviously album cover, portraits, video, some live, backstage. It was the whole story.
Yeah, and some conversation between us where, fortunately, he was able to remember more than I was. I'm just amused by this picture because I made my muscle look bigger, my bicep. My muscles aren't really that big.
Did you do a Bieber? Bieber had to get down and do 10 push-ups when you...
oh, that's right,
when you said, show us your guns, one of his people said...
No, I didn't do that. There's no point. I just make it bigger in post. It was a very heavy book. I think like each book that got sent out was like hundreds of pounds to post, wasn't it?
It was ridiculous, yeah.
Yeah. But that book is still... I mean, it's almost sold out now, isn't it? The sort of non-limited version.
It sold out and then it reprinted.
Yeah.
Because of like a surprising demand. Yeah, a lot of enthusiastic Manson fans out there.
There are lots of, rightly so.
And now I know at the time you suffer quite a lot from people taking your pictures and reusing them for their own purposes and not crediting you and things like that. So releasing 21 years of photos, did that increase the amount of bootlegging and ripping off? And
funnily enough, I had a conversation with somebody this morning about people. Somebody asked me why I don't watermark my pictures, and one of my pet hates in photography is when people put their signatures on the print, and it's like, your signature isn't important. That's not the important thing of this picture, and I don't like to watermark my pictures, and now I've kind of got used to everybody reposting pictures from the book. Sometimes if it's online and they haven't credited me, I'll go, I'll leave a comment, photo by Mimi at Mr. Perou. But I'm happy that the pictures are out there and doing their thing. This picture on screen now was like the first time I photographed Marilyn Manson in 1998.
Wow.
Which, as I say, is now 27 years ago. And I'll be photographing him next Friday when he plays London live next Friday.
Do you find that now, like a lot of gigs, there's so many photographers in the pit?
But it's not just photographers in the pit, it's also everybody in the audience that's got their iPhones. I mean, I've literally seen so many pictures of Manson live recently, either shot from an iPhone or somebody, you know, and there's this constant sort of over barrage of dross. You know, we're sort of losing iconic photos where there were less of them, but they were really special, and you really remembered those pictures to just like content. Everybody wants content, and it's kind of, even in terms of like you know, the big production shoots that we used to do for magazines. I remember doing a shoot with U2 for Blender, and we were out in the south of France at their house, and we were doing a cover shoot, and you know, it must have cost tens of thousands of dollars to put on this shoot. But the end picture is this shot of the band in the sea with a wave crashing behind them, and it's really, really iconic, and it's sort of memorable. Whereas, you know, they might be in the sea now for a photo, but it'll be shot on an iPhone. It'll be on Instagram one day, and then the next day it'll be gone.
Need something
it's
else.
just as, you know, it wouldn't be one picture a day, it would be like 10 pictures a day, and it's constant, a real dilution of that sort of high production value, iconic photography.
What do you think now, like, you know, if, like the other night I was at this thing, just backstage, and a couple of people were there, and someone said, oh, can you take a picture? And I was like, yeah. And everyone behaved differently in front of the camera than when people were taking the same picture with phones. And they weren't paying attention. They were just like, oh, it's just a phone. It's kind of, it's so everyday now to have a phone trained on them that they weren't. But when I got the camera, they were like, and it's kind of, that's quite refreshing. But I think it seems to be harder and harder to get artists to focus.
Since the end of COVID?
Yeah, well, not the artists, it's the people around them. The subject, I've found, is nearly always wants to be photographed well. They want to look good.
Oh, yeah.
So if you need a bit of time or a bit of whatever to get that happening, but everyone around them says, you know, you can do it digitally in 30 seconds.
The interesting thing for me is that literally something changed during COVID, whereas pre-COVID, a photographer was valued as the sort of, not the most important person in the room, but the second most important person in the room. There was the artist, and then there was the photographer, and the photographer was going to bring their vision to what was happening and you know, make the magic happen. COVID happened, and we came back after COVID, and it really threw me because the photographer had become insignificant. The hair and makeup artists were more important. The stylists were more important. And there was this sort of opinion that anybody with a camera or an iPhone could take the picture, and you were just a button presser. You know, so in the old days, I used to joke, you know, people used to say, oh, this is great. And I used to say, oh, you know, I just press a button for a living. These days, you know, I'll go, there's more to it than just pressing a button, you know. But people generally don't feel that's the case. And it's kind of shocking to photographers that we've become so devalued, and you know, it's been very hard for our egos to come to terms with that. That, you know, we used to be important. We used to be at the sort of top of the pyramid of people working on a shoot. Now, you know, if you're not available, if I'm not available, you know, if I'm booked to do a shoot and I'm not available, they'll just go to the next photographer. That it's not. You know, people will phone the agency that I'm part of and say, you know, we'd like Perou to do this shoot, and they go, Peru's away, and they go, oh, have you got anybody else to do the shoot? Or they'll phone up and go, we need a photographer. They don't need Perou to do it, they just need any photographer to press that button at the end of the day.
If you could...
Self-portrait, again.
Self-portrait. Who would you like to photograph that you haven't photographed?
I've always wanted to photograph Madonna.
What would you do?
Well, I couldn't tell you what I would do because, like, quite often I don't come to shoots with a preconceived idea. Sometimes I do. Sometimes I'll have a sketch, I'll have a thought in the night, and I'll draw a really bad stick drawing of what I want to do. Sometimes I just need to get in a room with someone and let the magic happen. And I think that's much more exciting and interesting than having this really preconceived, fixed idea. I remember doing a shoot with Badly Drawn Boy once for the NME, and it was a cover, and the art director had drawn him and the exact angle that his eyes needed to be looking off the page, and it was like, you might as well send a photo booth, because you're not letting the magic happen.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of magic on photo shoots when you bring one individual to meet one or more individuals and let stuff happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay to have a starting point and an idea to you know.
Absolutely, and especially if I'm photographing a band, I'm really against photographing bands against walls, you know, where they're struggling to look cool, and, you know, maybe, especially if they've been styled by somebody else, maybe if they're in their own clothes, it's okay. But I would like to give somebody a framework to be in, to perform or to be themselves. And so I don't like to even direct. Like the latest pictures that we've done with Manson for his latest album and his latest round of press, you know, I will have a setup and then I will let him do what he wants to do. And I will say if something doesn't look good, but I won't necessarily be imposing on him to tell him what to do. I'll let him be him. And I think, you know, that artists appreciate that, not being told what to do. Yeah, I've got no idea what would happen if I photographed Madonna. I'm really scared of her. I think that's probably why.
Maybe you could put her in an outfit like this.
Yeah, I mean, I'm more scared of Madonna than photographing people in full leather enclosure. Somebody said to me, they saw this picture the other day, I think it was my mum, and she said, oh, I wouldn't want to meet him down a dark street. All right. I'd probably not want to meet Madonna down a dark street. These are my people.
I don't know what to say about that.
I used to say I wanted to photograph everybody in the world. And I used to think that because digital cameras had become a thing and you didn't have to pay for film, that I would eventually get around to photographing everyone. And I have got around to photographing a lot of people that I've wanted to photograph. And there are people that I've missed out on photographing, like Spike Milligan, I really wanted to photograph. I want to photograph Christopher Walken. I want to photograph... there's loads of people that I do want to photograph. Johnny Cash I wanted to photograph. I was a huge Johnny Cash fan. This is somebody that I didn't necessarily want to photograph.
Nigel Farage.
Nigel Farage.
Who was this for? Was this for the Sunday Times or one
This
of those?
was for the Sunday Times, and he'd just come out of Celebrity Get Me Out of Here jungle thing. And I got a tremendous amount of grief for photographing Nigel Farage, which is really interesting to me because I am interested in photographing everyone. You know, like I've spent quite a lot of time on social media saying, fuck Putin, little dick. And I probably can't photograph Putin because I might be disappeared. But I would photograph Putin if I hadn't set myself up to not be able to photograph Putin, even though I hate him and everything he stands for.
Is there someone you wouldn't photograph?
Well, that's it. There isn't anybody that I wouldn't photograph. You know, I don't think as a photographer you're making judgments about people's politics, about people's personality.
Well, I think the thing is now, everyone's in a rush to be outraged by everything. So if we didn't work with people that we disagreed with, didn't like, or had objectionable past or presence, or, you know, you run out of people.
I mean, the interesting thing to me about this shoot is that I photographed the actor Matt Smith for the second time, the same week as I photographed Nigel Farage. And I thought I was going to really hate Nigel Farage in person. And he was a very charming, funny, warm person. And Matt Smith was a very egocentric, didn't care about what was happening. He was performative and he, you know, gave good photos, but he wasn't really interested in the people in the room at all, whereas Nigel Farage was very interested in what we were doing and what we were up to.
Do you think he's, you know, keen to be, you know, liked?
Oh, undoubtedly, he's a populist, so it's part of his thing to be popular and liked. But, you know, there are people that really like Trump. There are people that really like Nigel Farage, and he's a likeable character. You know, I don't like his politics, but actually, when you meet him, he was quite a laugh. Yeah. And it was quite a fun shoot. And he was up for doing stuff. I mean, the amount of people that if I said, I've got this idea about you eating worms, would go, I'm not doing that. Or his spad, you know, his political sidekick would step in and go, no chance, that's not happening. But they were up for it.
Yeah.
You know, he was up for making a fool of himself. He was up for doing something different, and he's made an iconic picture. There's another version of this where he's just got an eyeball on the plate, you know, and he was really game for it. And, you know, subsequently, I would say he was really great to photograph. And I find it amazing that so many people had an issue with the fact that I'd photographed him. You know, they don't like have a go at David Bailey because he photographed the craze who actually killed people. Or, you know, they don't have a go at...
They were good to their mother, though.
Maybe. And they don't have a go at Platon, you know, who has photographed Gaddafi and who's photographed Putin and some of the world's most horrible people. You know, they don't go, Platon's a really bad portrait photographer because he's photographed bad people. So, you know, for me, people used to say, like you've said just now, you know, who do you want to photograph? And I would quite often say, I would like to photograph Jesus Christ or the devil, and I don't care which. And that's something that I sort of stand by. I'm interested in meeting people. I'm interested in part of the reason that I am a photographer is that I'm interested, and I call myself a people photographer because I mainly photograph people, but I'm interested in meeting people and hearing their experiences and hearing their stories and getting their perspective on why we're here and what's going on in the world. So if you only photograph people that you agree with, then it's like you're in that echo chamber of Twitter or whatever, you know. You're just going to hear the same thing over and over again. So I'm interested to meet people with different opinions and that. And I still might not agree with them afterwards, and I probably don't. But it's, for me, the experience of photographing people is much more important than the photograph that comes from that. To me, the photograph's just almost like a residual trace of where I've been and who I've met, which might really upset my clients because they really care about the photograph. I really care about the experience of taking the photograph.
There's your wisdom giver there.
Yeah, Tom
Waits.
is one of the people that, you know, people used to say, who's your favourite person to photograph? And I'd often say Tom Waits, because he's like, the first time I photographed him, it was like me, Jill Furmanovsky and Anton Corbin out in Santa Rosa in California. And Anton had obviously photographed him tons of times before and was like the sort of big hitting photographer. We had all been out to find a location. You know, by the time I start, they go, don't think about using the empty rail track that runs through town because that's Anton's. And you're like, okay, you know, where am I going to do this shot? And I end up finding a puddle that I liked. And, oh, you know, don't shoot in the diner because Jill's got that, you know. So I had a nice puddle in a car park and I was going to photograph him in front of this puddle. And it had been like 18 hours to get there. And I took the first frame and he went, is that it? And I went, oh, fucking hell, Tom, like, it's taken me a long time to get here, you know, to get here. Shall I do another? He threw another pose and I took another photo and he went, is that it? So I literally shot 30 frames, no Polaroids, shot 30 frames. Every frame is different because he's one of those people like Nick Cave, like so many people, you press play on them and they go into their pose mode and they throw out these amazing shapes. At the end of it, I had no idea if I got any pictures whatsoever. This is the second time I went to photograph him, again in Santa Rosa. He gave me a book on the photographer Ouija and some Californian sun-made raisins, and I gave him a print from our first shoot. Again, like, he's just brilliant to photograph because he's so giving. Yeah, I love photographing Tom Waits. And anybody like Tom Waits, somebody who's generous with their time and is happy to like be performative, to fuck about and mess around and not
be
to
part of it.
Not to care how, you know, looking good. They're not worried about looking good so much as just up for. I photographed Juliette Lewis. I put her on the on my Instagram the other day, and she's brilliant to photograph because she's just messing around, having fun.
This was another book project of pictures of underpasses, which sounds like a hard sell.
It is a hard sell. Yeah,
But it was a serious project.
Yeah, this book's called Tunnel Vision, and again, it came out with Real Art Press, and it's a collection of English underpasses at night. Unexpectedly beautiful, empty English underpasses at night.
Do Americans call them something different?
I don't know. I don't know even if they have underpasses. That's a good question. They almost definitely called it something different. But and it also had associated text. So each slate was a full-page underpass with some of the texts that we'd collected. And I did this with Carl Hyde from Underworld. We both have a sort of similar interest in ugly urban architecture and details. He's really good at photographing details, and we're both interested in words. So it was pictures and words. I think the words just run very small with the latitude and longitude of where I took them. But yeah, so I can't just say I'm a people photographer anymore. I'm a people, underpasses, big cats. Things, yeah.
You're a photographer, which is, most photographers who get known for one thing tend to resent it. Like, oh, you're the Beatles photographer, and they hate it because that was like 3 months out of 50 years. Or
I think people think that I only photograph Marilyn Manson.
Yeah.
But yeah, not always.
Well, good luck next week with Manson. And is there anything else on the horizon that you can tell us about?
I'm doing a really big project. I don't know if I can tell you about it, but I'm going to anyway. It's confirmed. I'm going to do a big project at Dreamland in Margate.
Oh, right.
Throughout the whole of the summer. And maybe I shouldn't tell you too much more, but there'll be opportunities to find me at Dreamland in Margate and maybe be photographed by me.
Oh, nice.
And something is coming up there.
That could be an excuse for me to visit Margate for the first time ever.
I was going to say something bad about Margate, but I probably shouldn't with that
Well, it's
in
quite
mind.
happening, apparently.
Yeah.
Compared to when it wasn't happening.
Yeah, it's got something going on, you know.
Well, we always like to end on a positive, so I'll give you a moment to say something positive.
About Margate or about
anything.
life in general?
About anything.
Oh,
Why should someone become a photographer? You know, all these kids, everyone wants to be a photographer. Why should someone be a photographer?
Well, you're sending me down a very negative route there.
Yeah.
I encourage both of my children not to be photographers, even though they are naturally better at photography than I am. It's a struggle for me taking photographs. I'm like Salieri to Mozart. You know, for me it's like torturous and it's quite hard taking photographs. Some people have it very easy.
Could you do anything else though? Are you unemployable now?
I can do all sorts of things. You know, I'm a jack of all trades and a master of none. Something positive, let me think. Something positive in relation to photography.
Anything you like. I'm aware that my talks tend to become like moan-a-thons about it was in the old days.
I don't think we've had any moan about it. One of the things I don't like to talk about photography because I think photography should be about pictures and not about words. And I think that we always used to say a picture speaks 1,000 words, and now you can write 100 words and make a picture.
Yeah.
And so we're losing the art of seeing and replacing it with creative writing. And that is horrifying to me, and I think it's a tragedy. So I will continue seeing things and catching and like collecting things that I've seen. That's what I do. I'm not interested in writing, replacing photography, or, you know, photo-like illustrations aren't photography to me. Photography is about reality, and the reality, as I said, is going to become more and more important. But something positive.
Well, that was quite positive. Reality is going to be more, because I think everything's so surreal now. Like the world, people, technology, how we look at pictures, how we spend more time describing them than looking at them, taking them.
I think for those of us that are compelled to take pictures of reality, that's going to carry on. And I think reality will become more and more important. I think documentary photography is the sort of pinnacle of everything that's important about photography, and everything else isn't.
There you go. Thanks for coming along.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.